It's one of the strangest murders that the special agent has ever seen. In fact, he's not even sure that it is a murder. What he does know is that the body sprawled out in front of him, contorted and cold against his own kitchen floor tiles, is dead. The victim is a man in his late 20s, handsome, dressed in a designer button-down shirt and jeans. The dead man's upscale apartment is crawling with CSI techs in hazmat gear, brushing and dusting every inch for fingerprints, stray hairs, clothes fibers, anything. A quick look at the photos on the wall reveals to the special agent that the victim was clearly a well-off guy, given his many exotic vacation destinations, and in every single one, he's sunbathing on some picturesque beach working on his tan. And yet, the body on the ground is pale as snow. For a man who looked like he'd been dead for less than 12 hours, based on the lack of flies in the room, he was far paler than he should have been. It's the kind of case that stumps your standard rank-and-file police detectives, the kind that takes real out-of-the-box thinking to solve, the exact kind of case they call in the special agent for. He's a member of the FBI's elite serial crime unit, with a history of consulting on some of the more strange acts of homicide that have taken place over the United States. Cases like satanic cult killings, murders committed by people with messianic delusions, and even some killings that truly defied explanation. Now he needs to find out what kind of case this is exactly. According to the first responders, investigators arrived on the scene after the man's housekeeper found him unresponsive in the kitchen. There were no signs of foul play, forced entry, or even any wounds on the man's body. The attending beat cop who'd first touched the man's neck found that he was icy cold to the touch. The special agent isn't too worried about all this. He has faith in science to deliver him the answers his eyes can't. He's sure that the autopsy and the tox report will bring some clarity to all this. The last thing he expects is that it'll only raise more questions than answers. Tox report arrives at the bureau office where the special agent is stationed the next day. No drugs or poisons in the victim's system. None, nada, zilch. And cross-referencing the report against the victim's medical records, there didn't seem to be anything in his system that betrayed a sudden and dangerous allergic reaction. The special agent places down the papers and takes a sip of his coffee. Strange. Maybe the autopsy will at least shed some light on all this. He heads down to the medical examiner's office the next day to get the details from the coroner firsthand. The victim is laid out on the slab under a white sheet, the deed already done. The special agent can tell from the perplexed look on the coroner's face that this meeting probably isn't going to be as illuminating as he hopes. It's the strangest thing, the coroner says, trying to maintain a sense of professional composure. No wounds, no internal damage, no indicators of disease, but what, doctor? The special agent asks. He's been exsanguinated. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd say he bled to death, the coroner says. But that's impossible. How can a man bleed to death with no wounds? No blood on the scene either, the special agent murmurs to himself. So many questions linger, all falling under one umbrella. What happened to this guy? The special agent takes the subway home that night, his mind flooded with questions about the peculiar case that's fallen into his lap. That's when he sees two teenage girls gathered around a phone, giggling at a video that's gone viral on TikTok. An extremely bizarre and embarrassing moment that had unfolded with a local politician on TV. Midway through a speech, he'd begun to scream and then peed his pants with great intensity in front of the entire crowd. The special agent tuts to himself. The things kids spend their time on these days. He has no way of knowing that this bizarre little instance is related to the very same case he's investigating. Later that night, the patrons of a nearby club do what they do best. They dance under the pulsing lights to the steady thrum of electronic music. This same club was frequented not 24 hours ago by the very man whose death the special agent is investigating. Not that he'll ever find that out. A handsome young man in his early 20s is having the night of his life. Dancing, swaying, the ladies hanging off of him. He's on top of the world now, at his peak. But he's still human. And every human needs to pee now and then. He retires to the bathroom, does his business, and splashes cold water up against his face. That's when he notices the attendant in the corner. A skinny, sallow-faced man standing at a cart covered in warm towels and aftershaves and fancy soaps. Of course, he'll expect a tip for one of these. But that's not why he's here. As the young man tries to leave the bathroom, the attendant offers him a red lollipop, an inexplicable club tradition. The young man can't help but sigh. "How much?" the young man asks. "For you, sir," the attendant asks with a thin, brittle voice. "No charge." The young man gives a polite nod, takes the lollipop, and leaves. He'll probably eat that tomorrow when he's bored and hungover. Tonight is just for fun. He has no idea that a candy just like this one killed a man the previous night. Ah, the humble lollipop. Normally, the only real hazard it can pose to people is the potential for choking. That is, unless you're dealing with SCP-819, codenamed the Vital Suckers. Nobody knows who created them, where they came from, or what quality gives them their often dangerous anomalous effects. But what we do know is that they're a cunning confection capable of leaching fluids directly from your body anytime you happen to be sucking on them. But given that the human body is up to 60% fluid, they have plenty of bodily fluids to choose from. However, it's important for you to understand that putting an SCP-819 sample in your mouth won't immediately turn you into a withered husk like you drank from the wrong grail. Each different kind of lollipop extracts a different kind of fluid, and luckily, they're color-coded for our convenience. There are 6 different varieties of SCP-819 lollipop. The cherry-flavored red lollipop, which corresponds to blood, the orange color and flavor, which will slowly relieve you of your gastric acid, the lemon-flavored yellow lollipop, which will take your urine, the lime-flavored green lollipop, which will pilfer your phlegm, the purple grape lollipop, which will happily slurp up your cerebrospinal fluid, and the blue raspberry lollipop, which will steal the liquid of your aqueous and vitreous humors. That includes the liquid inside your eyeballs, just in case all of this wasn't revolting enough. The anomaly was first discovered and apprehended after causing several incidents in a hospital pediatric ward, where it was common practice for the staff to provide children with a lollipop for behaving well during their consultation. Thankfully, there were no fatal casualties here, as the effects of the lollipops are only active when the candies are actually being sucked. The second the sucking ceases, the fluids will regenerate at a normal rate for that particular fluid. You'd be forgiven for thinking the SCP-819 samples are no different to their non-anomalous counterparts, given that their packaging is identical to the normal lollipops. They taste exactly the same as the regular ones and can be just as easily destroyed. But don't let any of this fool you. They can be extremely dangerous if engaged without proper caution for a few reasons. Firstly, the amount of fluid taken with each suck is fixed and not proportional to the amount of fluid in the victim's body. What does this mean in practice? Simple. You can be dead in fewer licks than it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop if you're not careful. But the anomaly can also be extremely dangerous in its secondary anomalous effect too. And that secondary effect can be introduced with a simple question. When all of this fluid is taken from the person sucking the lollipop, where does it go? And I sadly can't tell you that the answer will bring you any comfort. In short, the fluids are transported into the bodies of innocent bystanders somewhere in the wider vicinity of the initial victim. This generally won't be a huge issue when the victim has only licked the lollipop once or twice, but the more fluids taken from the original victim, the more danger both they and the affected bystander are in. So what kind of effects are each of the vital suckers liable to cause for the people being affected by the secondary anomalous trait? Well, if someone has been using a red sucker and you're getting all their excess blood, you'll potentially be dealing with extremely high blood pressure, arterial swelling, increased blood volume, and potentially even bursting, which can be, needless to say, extremely hazardous to your health. If someone is enjoying an orange sucker, you'll end up getting their stomach acid on top of your own, leading to severe acid reflux and sometimes even vomiting up acid, which will be terrible for your esophagus and your teeth. What about the yellow sucker? That means someone will be generously pouring their urine directly into your bladder, which risks both the rupturing of your bladder and the discharge of large amounts of pee. Essentially, if you're lucky, you'll just wet yourself with extreme force. If you're unlucky, you'll be taking a trip to the hospital with urea poisoning. But you wouldn't feel much better if someone was sucking the green lollipop, where you'll find yourself receiving a considerable donation of phlegm. Expect to be vomiting and sneezing up large quantities of phlegm, all while experiencing difficulty breathing from the phlegm clogging up your airways. This leaves the blue and purple suckers, both of which have some horrifying effects on both the sucker and the suckee. or rather the person being indirectly affected by the sucking. I'm sorry, there's no way to phrase this that doesn't sound strange and uncomfortable. The blue lollipop will cause additional fluids to build up inside your eyeballs, which can have the horrifying effect of potentially popping the lens out of your eye, or causing your eye to start bulging out of its socket. And having additional cerebrospinal fluid pumped into your body by someone going to town on a purple sucker can lead to cerebral edema, double vision, headaches, slurred speech, and perception issues. So it's no picnic either. Of course, I could talk your ear off all day about the contextual details around the discovery, classification, and primary and secondary anomalous effects of these malicious candies, but we all know why you're really here. The test logs. Because of course, after cataloging the 6 different kinds of vital sucker, the Foundation needed to do its scientific due diligence and requisition a number of D-class test subjects for more in-depth experiments. There were, naturally, several deaths over the course of the experiments. Before we get into the darker and more disgusting tests, I will, in the interest of full disclosure, mention that the Foundation also wanted to test whether the SCP-819 had any appreciable taste differences from their non-anomalous counterparts. A D-class was given a sample of each anomalous lollipop and a non-anomalous version of the same flavor, and was asked to taste them all to see whether he could tell which ones were slowly stealing his body fluids. He could not. This led to a memo being passed around suggesting that the handles of SCP-819 be marked to avoid staff members ever actually using them, which does admittedly raise questions as to why Foundation staff are eating lollipops on the job frequently enough for this to be a tangible risk. And now back to the good part. For these next tests, the D-class personnel members were each given one of the lollipops in order to lick them to completion. Again, I apologize for the phrasing, this is just where we are right now. During these tests, rigorous notes were taken, and they were hooked up to a variety of monitoring devices, including an ECG, a pulse oximeter, and a pneumograph. The first subject was given the red lollipop, and the research notes were as follows. The subject began consuming the lollipop, showing no adverse symptoms besides development of mild tachycardia in the first few minutes. After approximately 5 minutes, the subject began to appear pale, with moderate tachycardia and reduction in difference between diastolic and systolic blood pressures. The subject became slightly disoriented, but was ordered to continue. Over several minutes, the subject's blood pressure began to drop, resulting in an increased heartbeat as the body attempted to catch up. At 10 minutes, the subject began exhibiting signs of hypovolemic shock and became less lucid as blood pressure dropped further. Subject lost consciousness less than 3 minutes later. The sample of SCP-819 A was recovered, 2/3 consumed. The subject expired 1 minute after loss of consciousness. The autopsy showed the cause of death was lack of blood. It was estimated that the subject had lost over half his blood supply during the course of the experiment. Next came the orange lollipop, which had less deadly results, but was still an undeniably extremely unpleasant experience. Here are the notes. Subject reluctantly began eating the lollipop, commenting how he always hated the taste of orange. The subject exhibited no symptoms for the first several minutes. At 5 minutes, the subject complained of heartburn. Vitals remained stable. After 30 minutes, there were no further changes in the subject's symptoms besides a slight increase in pain. The subject was released after the lollipop was fully consumed and monitored for the next 36 hours. The subject exhibited significant stomach pains after eating and developed diarrhea and slight malnutrition, congruent with symptoms of achlorrhea. The subject recovered after several days from natural regeneration of gastric acid. The subject also developed several peptic ulcers from the lack of phlegm protecting the stomach lining during the experiment. An undeniably revolting result, but could the same be said for the yellow lollipop? The subject proceeded to consume the lollipop. After 15 minutes, no changes were seen in the subject's vitals, nor any abnormal sensations were reported by the subject. When pressed, the subject remarked that he felt less of an urge to urinate than at the beginning of the procedure. The test was put on hold while the subject was instructed to consume 1 liter of water and wait until the urge to urinate was intense. Subject was again ordered to consume SCP-819-C. After 2 minutes, the subject reported the urge to urinate had decreased. After 10 minutes, the subject had no urge to urinate, and when ordered to attempt, no urine remained in the subject's bladder. The researchers were intrigued by this one, wondering if perhaps this could be put to some use by the Foundation, like deploying them to undercover Foundation agents on stakeouts to prevent them from needing to urinate during sensitive missions, though they disapproved of Foundation personnel requesting use of the yellow suckers for personal reasons. The green sucker, on the other hand, wasn't so useful. After about 3 minutes, the subject noted that it felt like his sinuses were beginning to clear and happily continued. Within another 3, the subject reported his nose felt very dry and a little painful. Further consumption caused sinus and nasal pain increases, as well as the development of his throat becoming sore and breathing becoming slightly difficult. Continued progress resulted in painful swallowing, more labored breathing, and strong pain in all previously affected areas. After the end of consumption, the subject was released and monitored for 5 days. Initial examination showed inflamed nasal, sinus, and esophageal tissue. Similar irritation on the lungs was confirmed when the subject's respiration was examined. The subject quickly developed rhinorrhea and succumbed to several strains of stomach and rhinoviruses. After recovering from the illnesses, the subject was back to normal, though it is theorized that some of the production glands were damaged from the prolonged lack of phlegm. But if you can believe it, the blue lollipop yielded even more disturbing results. Within 15 seconds, the subject reported difficulty seeing. At 1 minute, subject lost all vision. Upon physical examination, it was shown the aqueous humor was depleted and that the mass of the eye was beginning to shrink. Further consumption caused the subject's eyes to shrink and then shrivel as vitreous humor was lost. After 4 minutes, eyes were fully devoid of humor and were shriveled. Patient was able to feel the eyes shrinking, but did not experience any pain until the eyes reduced to the point that it was straining connection to the optical nerve. Eyes did not rehydrate after the end of the experiment due to the vitreous humor being a non-replenished fluid. The subject was terminated after this experiment. A severe reaction? Perhaps, but probably for the best, all things considered. But there was no need to terminate the test subject after the purple lollipop. The lollipop itself took care of that. Within 20 seconds of beginning to eat the lollipop, the subject complained of a sudden severe headache and weakness. Reclining appeared to lessen the pain, indicating an orthostatic headache. The subject was ordered to sit up and continue. The subject also complained of dizziness, vertigo, and double vision. Within 3 minutes of starting the experiment, the subject became unconscious. Subject pronounced dead 30 seconds after loss of consciousness. The sample of SCP-819-F was only slightly consumed. Autopsy showed a severe lack of cerebrospinal fluid, causing the brain to lose buoyancy and constrict blood vessels providing blood to the brain. Thankfully, despite the dangers they pose in a hospital pediatric ward or in the hands of a creep lurking inside a club bathroom, these lollipops can't pose much of a threat inside a secure SCP Foundation containment locker. It has been assigned the SAFE Containment Class, and if you want to access the candy for testing, you only need to ask lead case researcher Dr. Drain for permission. Personally, I think I'll just play it safe and stick to chocolate. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-1550, Dr. Wondertainment's Custom Pets, Top 12 SCP Animals compilation.